what's been good about your day? It's Mrs. Newport. It's time for story time. Have you ever heard of the Big Orange Splot? This is by Daniel Manus Pinkwater. Pinkwater, that's fun to say. So I thought this would be a fun one. My sweet neighbor let me borrow this because, man, I have gone through all of my books. So I hope you've enjoyed them. Let's see what this one is about. The Big Orange Splot. Mr. Plumbean lived on a street where all the houses were the same. Do you live in an area where all the houses are the same? Let's find out what happens in this one. He liked it that way. So did everybody else on Mr. Plumbean's street. This is a neat street, they would say. Then, one day, a seagull flew over Mr. Plumbean's house. He was carrying a can of bright orange paint. No one knows why. And he dropped the can, no one knows why, right over Mr. Plumbean's house. Oh no. It made a big orange splot on Mr. Plumbean's house. Oh, too bad, everyone said. Mr. Plumbean will have to paint his house again. I suppose I will, said Mr. Plumbean. But he didn't paint his house right away. He looked at the big orange splot for a long time and then he went about his business. The neighbors got tired of seeing that big orange splot and someone said, Mr. Plumbean, we wish you'd get around to painting your house. Okay, said Mr. Plumbean. He got some blue paint and some white paint, and that night he got busy. He painted at night because it was cooler. When the paint was gone, the roof was blue, and the walls were white, and the big orange splot was still there. Then he got some more paint, and he got red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and purple paint. And in the morning, the other people on the street came out of their houses, and their houses were all the same. But Mr. Plumbean's house was like a rainbow. It was like a jungle. It was like an explosion. There was a big orange splot, and there were little orange splots, and there were stripes, and there were pictures of elephants and lions and pretty girls and steam shovels. The people said, Plumbean has popped his cork, flipped his wig, blown his stack, and dropped his stopper. They went away muttering. That day, Mr. Plumbean bought carpenter's tools, and that night he went out and built a tower on top of his roof, and he painted a clock on the tower. The next day, the people said, Plumbean has gushed his mush, lost his marbles, and slipped his hawser. They decided they would pretend not to notice. That very night, Mr. Plumbean got a truck full of green things. What do you think those green things are? Let's find out. He planted palm trees, baobabs, thorn bushes, onions, and frangipani. In the morning, he bought a hammock and an alligator. When the other people came out of their houses, they saw Mr. Plumbean swinging in a hammock between two palm trees, and they saw an alligator lying in the grass. Mr. Plumbean was drinking lemonade. Plumbean has gone too far. This used to be a neat street. Plumbean, what have you done to your house? The people shouted. My house is me, and I am it. My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams, Mr. Plumbean said. The people went away. They asked the man who lived next door to Mr. Plumbean to go and have a talk with him. Tell him that we all liked it before he changed this house. Tell him that his house has to be the same as ours so we can have a neat street. The man went to Mr. Plumbean that evening. They sat under the palm trees drinking lemonade and talking all night. Early the next morning, the man went to get lumber and rope and nails and paint. And when the people came out of their houses, they saw a red and yellow ship next door to Mr. Plumbean. What have you done to your house? They shouted to the man. My house is me, and I am it. "My house is where I'd like to be, and it looks like all my dreams," said the man, who had always loved ships. "He's just like Plumbean," the people said. "He's got bees in his bonnet, bats in his belfry, and knots in his noodle." Then, one by one, they went to see Mr. Plumbean late at night. They would sit under the palm trees and drink lemonade and talk about their dreams. And whenever anybody visited Mr. Plumbean's house, the very next day, that person would set about changing their own house to fit their dreams. Oh, wow, look. It looks like a hot air balloon. What does that one look like? Kind of like a castle? Oh, there really is a castle. Look at that one. Oh, look at this one with the pillars and the columns. Fancy. Whenever a stranger came to the street of Mr. Plumbean and his neighbors, the strangers would say, "Oh, this is not a neat street." Then all the people would say, "Our street is us, and we are it. Our street is where we like to be, and it looks like all our dreams." Look at those palm trees. Wasn't that cute? I liked that one. I hope you make a difference today. Go do something fun and tell me about it.